Ladies and gentlemen, we are now live, and I am joined by the absolutely amazing Dr. Samantha Hart, and her story is unbelievable. I welcome to a conversation with, and I am your humble host, Floyd Marshall Jr. And as always, make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel because I want to keep bringing you absolutely amazing guests like the one that I'm about to introduce you to today. Again, her name is Dr. Samantha Hart, and I'm going to give you guys a little background on this amazing woman and
Mhm.
her absolutely amazing journey. So, Dr. Samantha Hart is a physical therapist, sober mom of two, and she can add author to the list as her self help memoir, Breaking the Circuit, launches June the 10th. It takes a fresh, new approach to the 12 steps once confined to the rooms of recovery and extracts the universal message and process of change to help people all over the world have a new blueprint for living. With more
Mm.
than 15 years now in recovery, a thriving career, and a life as a mom, Samantha believes the greatest thing she can do is merge science and soulfulness to help others find resilience and joy in the face of trauma. In her
Mm.
book, she shows readers how they too can change their lives with the power of these steps. Samantha's harrowing yet hopeful journey is a testament to each person's power to turn trauma and pain into triumph and joy. Hence, the title of this podcast, From Rock Bottom to Rock Star, because, ladies and gentlemen, we are looking at an absolute rock star. Dr. Samantha Hart, welcome to a conversation with. How are you? So glad to have you here.
That was an amazing introduction. Wow. Sometimes it's important to stop for a second and just
Yeah,
go, God damn, like I'm doing the thing, you
yeah,
know? When you're head down in a long-term project, like writing
mhm,
a book, sometimes you forget every tiny little decision you made, every commitment you kept to yourself to get where you are. And hearing that is just like, yes, Sam, you are doing it. You are doing
yeah,
it.
yeah,
And once upon a time, my inner critic would have come front and center to the table listening to you read that and been spouting off at the mouth
mhm,
about what I didn't do
right,
and what I could have done better. And instead, my truest self is like, I'm so proud of you.
yeah. So you used to have that inner voice, and it's interesting. I was talking with this about this with my wife the other day. You had that inner voice where you had a solution for every problem.
Mm.
So as I'm reading that laundry is, oh, she accomplished this, but she didn't do that. You accomplished this, but you left that on the table.
Mm.
So let me ask you a question because I did a lot of research on you, and it was an absolutely amazing journey. And as I said in the introduction, you're a doctor, you're a physical therapist, you're a life coach, personal trainer, dancer, singer. And now most people would say Samantha Hart is an accomplished woman, but that wasn't
Mm.
always the case. Can you
Mhm.
take us back?
Oh, I sure can. So I'll take you back to my early 20s. I was living in Manhattan. I was totally broke. I was getting my undergraduate degree because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. That's what my mother said would lead me to a stable life. Even though in my bones, all I wanted to do was sing and dance like a fool. But I was real good in school. If you gave me a linear path about how to achieve X, Y, and Z, I could follow it and I'd get A plus plus plus.
Mhm.
So academia was comfortable. And so I'm swimming around in this undergraduate program, getting a degree in quote unquote communications because it felt loose enough to give me wiggle room as I stumbled around trying to figure out what life was going to look like if I wasn't going to sing and dance. And at the time, I did a lot of different things to make money and pay rent in Manhattan. I was a personal trainer, I taught some dance classes, and I bartended. And one of the clients I had from personal training was this sort of rough and tough guy who was born and raised in Hell's Kitchen. He came from the Irish mob, and his dad was one of the last gangsters. And he told me this story one time where he opened the front door to his dad's killer when he was 13.
Mm.
He felt responsible for his dad's death. He was also 22 years sober from heroin addiction, and he seemed so happy. And we would throw jabs and hooks and get our sweat on and shoot the shit. And I would bitch and complain about my family and how nobody respected my boundaries. And he'd say, you know what, kid? Nobody pushes your buttons like family because they're the ones who installed them. And then he wasn't a client anymore. He was just a friend, and I finished undergrad and I thought, well, I don't know about this dance thing because every class I take, I am not getting picked. I'm not the teacher's favorite pet. I am whipping myself that I should be thinner and more capable. And why haven't I booked a job by now? And maybe this industry isn't for me. So what if I chose a degree? Would that look like? And I thought about physical therapy because someone had planted that seed a few years earlier. And I thought, well, that sounds kind of like me, the body. I could have my own clinic. And as I'm studying and trying to get into grad school, because I had none of the classes that were required, because I was just trying to be an artist. So I didn't take a single science class.
Mm.
So I'm back in school, but I'm also bartending to pay my rent. And I'm drinking a lot behind the bar. And I had always dabbled in drinks and drugs. It was very normalized in my house. My mom was a prescription pill abuser. My dad was all kinds of addicted, quote unquote, functioning, and also the family enabler. So when the drugs ran out for my mom because the doctor said, I think you're starting to use these a little too much, my dad got the drugs in his name and he was able to supply her with what she needed. And so it wasn't weird to me to use substances. And it definitely wasn't on my list of possibility that anything bad was going to happen. Because look at what I could do.
Mhm.
I had a boyfriend. I had an apartment. I was surviving in Manhattan. I made money. I was teaching at a fancy dance studio in Midtown. Check, 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 getting straight A's, working my way into trying to get into a doctoral program. And before I knew it, I was doing cocaine as regularly as I was drinking.
Mhm.
And it was a match made in heaven because if I drank too early in the night and too much, the coke would level me back out. Again, never something I thought I would lose control of ever. I was a hardwired perfectionist. Control had a noose around my neck. Anything that I could get my hands on, you better believe I could and I would do it well. I would do it better than
Mhm.
you. So why would this be any different? And on the day that I got accepted into a doctoral program, I had worked so hard studying and tutoring and getting all the A's you need to get in the sciences, which terrified me to get into graduate school. I knew exactly who I was going to call to celebrate. And it was this woman I had only met one other time who partied like I did. So she came over at 2 p.m. one afternoon in the wintertime in Manhattan, and we called the dealer and we got an enormous amount of cocaine. And we proceeded to do lines all day. And we took the coke with us and we went shopping, those little outdoor shopping centers for anyone who's been to New York City in Christmas time, stopping in the bars, drinking a Corona, doing another bump. We get back to my place. It's evening. She wants to wrap presents. I start feeling funny, Can't really explain it. I just did not feel right in the head. I decide I'm going to go into the bedroom and rest. I stand up to get the TV remote. The next thing I know, I'm laying on my side and I'm coming to. And as my gaze goes from horizontal to vertical, I realize something awful must have happened
Mhm.
because she's on the phone trying to tell the ambulance where we were so they could take me to the hospital. And even though I didn't know what happened, I knew it was horrible. And I quickly felt the shame envelop me and I got her off the phone. Get off, get off, get off. No. The next day was Christmas Eve. The next day I was supposed to meet up with my sister and my family. A couple days after that, I was supposed to meet up with my boyfriend. Nobody's taking me to a hospital. This is not a big deal. Get off the phone right now. What I found out later was that I overdosed. I
Mm.
started seizuring, and she was trying to get me on my side to pull my tongue out of the back of my throat so I wouldn't choke on it. So when I did come to and I looked in the mirror, I had a big cut across my chin. There's so much I can tell you in the days after that. But what I want to tell you circles back to my friend Bobby, the one I punched with at the gym, who was my personal training client. Because he was the only person I knew
Mhm.
who talked about sobriety. And I was scared when that happened. Definitely wasn't ready to be sober, but I was scared. So I called Bobby because I felt like he wasn't going to judge me. And he said, let me take you to a meeting. So he did. And I sat in the back with my arms crossed and I othered myself to death. I'm not like you or you or you. I don't look like you. I don't drink like you. I don't smell like you. I don't talk like you. I am smarter than you. I am more capable than you. Look, I have all the things. I got the boyfriend. I'm about to be a doctor. I have a job. I just have this little tiny cocaine problem. So if someone could just help me with that real quick, I'll be on my merry way. I
Mm.
was not ready. And that was the only meeting I went to for the next year and a half because I thought, I got this. And what that ended up looking like was a series of switching the cocktail, really, really convincing myself that I could drink but not do cocaine. And then when I proved that wrong, because that was impossible, I thought, well, I just need to switch to downers because that's not going to kill me.
Mhm.
And my dad's my drug dealer. So this is perfect. I'll have my dad meet me in the city when I start to run low and he'll re-up my supply of Xanax and Ambien. And I'm good. Just smoke a ton of weed, pop the pill, blackout, all good, safe in my bed. And for some reason, on this one day, I had moved the bottle of pills from this really discreet spot in this tiny bathroom in our Hell's Kitchen apartment with the boyfriend I was living with into my sock drawer. But it was a shared sock drawer.
Mm.
Now, call that a God shot, call that divine intervention, or call that a sloppy decision by an active addict. Call it what you will. He found the bottle of pills. He held them up and he said, I cannot fucking believe you're still doing this shit. And the shame that I felt from the way he looked at me matched the shame that I felt at the look in my friend's eyes who was calling 911. And I thought, if I don't do something about this, he's going to leave me.
Mm.
Now, it wasn't, if I don't do something about this, I'm going to die.
Right.
No, it was outside of me that spooked me back into a meeting. I don't recommend that, by the way, but
Mhm.
this is my story. I call Bobby again. Hey, so I think I need to go to another meeting. All right, kid, let's go. Sat in the back with my arms folded and othered myself to death. Kept smoking weed. Eventually, I leaned over to Bobby in the first 30 days and I said, everybody keeps talking about mind altering substances from the neck up. So
Mhm.
does that mean I also can't smoke weed? And he's like, that is what that means, kid. If you're
So
really
you
trying to get
right,
sober,
can't
you
do
gotta
anything.
you can't do anything. And he said, we got to start your day count over. Let's just pick. We were somewhere in February. And he just said, let's call it February 28th. Let's just pick the end of February.
Hmm.
Cool. February 28th, 2009 is my sobriety date. Bobby took me to meeting after meeting after meeting in that first year. I hated it. I hated the language of the steps. I didn't know why at the time, but I knew that they came up against everything I had learned. And now, from the seat I'm in, with all the therapy, all the step work I've done, they were coming up against the very things that I learned as a child that kept me safe in the world. My mother's word ruled in
Hmm.
our house. She was a kind of deity to me. She was God to me. And she looked me dead in the eye from an early age and said, there is no such thing as God. And whoever believes that is a fool. And the only person you can count on is yourself.
Hmm.
So now I'm in recovery. I've got all the things. I just have a little cocaine problem, a little drug problem. And
Right.
you want me to get down with God?
Hmm.
No fucking way. No. But I believed Bobby. For some reason, I didn't believe a goddamn thing that anybody was saying, but I
Right.
believed that Bobby had recovered from something
Mhm.
and that he was happy. And I followed him around and we went through the steps knowing full well I couldn't stand God. And he said, don't worry, you don't have to. If you believe in my recovery, that's good enough. You borrow my faith till you get some of your own. It's all good. We don't have to call it God. Let's just go. Let's go and do the work. So we did the work. We went through the steps. We went through them rather quickly because I think he knew I was hanging on by a thread and he
Mhm.
was trying to save my life. And at the end of that first year, he started to act different. And I couldn't put my finger on it. But he just wasn't quite the same. And I was about to go to California for 8 weeks. I was well into my graduate program. I had an opportunity to go to Cedar Sinai. And I said, hey, Bobby, I don't know what's going on with you, but we were friends before any of this. And I don't want to mess that up. So I'm going to get a temporary sponsor in California. And I'd love to just go back to being friends. And he was okay with that.
Mhm.
I got out to California. I started taking dance classes. I'm working in this hospital, which, by the way, was one of the most difficult clinical rotations of my life. The advisor I had was so hard on me, and I was still so hard on myself because I
Mhm.
was early in recovery. I was going home crying every single day, but I felt the surge of possibility for a life out there. I felt like, if not New York, then yes, LA, because yes, I can do PT, but maybe I can dance and do choreography and all this other stuff too. And I wanted to tell Bobby about it so badly. And I kept calling and calling and calling. And he never picked up. And I
Mm.
was getting so pissed. This guy has all this time sober and he's letting his ego get in the way of being happy for me,
Right.
right? Just accumulating resentment. Finally, after the zillionth phone call, his wife picked up. Samantha, Bobby relapsed. That is why you haven't heard from him. Maybe when you get back to New York, you can meet up with him and speak to him for yourself.
Mhm.
Click.
Oh.
It was unimaginable to me
Mhm.
that a guy with his recovery could relapse. I didn't know anything about addiction. And I was so confused and I was so scared. And I couldn't wait to get back and meet up with him. So I did. I made it a priority, met up with him. And it was as if somebody crawled into his face and went behind his eyes and blew the light out.
Mm.
It was like being in the presence of a ghost, a person whose body is physically alive, but whose spirit, whose essence, the thing that makes them quintessentially who they are, is dead.
Mm.
Very scary. And I said, what happened? What happened? Turned his face, couldn't look me in the eye. Excuse, excuse, excuse. Not an admission of relapse,
Mm.
just angry. I had a shoulder surgery and then I got a fucking staph infection and they gave me oxys and Heather is on my ass and I want a fucking divorce. Bobby, did you relapse? I don't understand. I'm new in recovery. I don't understand. Nothing.
Mm.
We met up one more time. He had a sling around his shoulder because of the surgery, and I was about to be a PT. And he found a way to bring me around again. I think he was so lonely and so sad. And he said, "Can you
Mm.
help me clean up my apartment? I'll pay you." Bobby, I'm not going to charge you for that. Yes, I'll come to your apartment. And I'm picking up all his shit and we're putting it in the laundry basket and we're walking down 8th Avenue and dropping it off. And I feel so uncomfortable. And I think to myself, I can't do this again with him for a little bit. It's just too hard. And 2 weeks later, my sober friend, she had much more time than I did. And for some reason, she took a liking to me. I was such a pain in the ass in early recovery, as many new recovering addicts are. I was so self-righteous and so demanding. But she liked me and she was a buddy of mine. And she said, "Where are you right now?" I'm like, "Why? What's wrong?" "I need to come to your apartment and talk to you. So just head back and I'll be there in 30 minutes. She comes over, she sits down, she puts her hand on my forearm and she said, "Bobby's dead."
Oh boy.
And we sobbed like two young women would who were overwhelmed with grief.
Mm.
And what we found out, we meaning his inner circle, not the AA community at large, who thought it was an accident,
Mm.
but the people who knew he had been struggling, he had relapsed. What we found out is that he jumped out of his 8th-story window
Oh wow.
and fell to his death.
Mm.
So, what did I learn in that moment? I learned that addiction is out for blood, that it doesn't discriminate. It does not care if you have 50 days or 50 years. It can smell your vulnerability and it is waiting to pounce. And I knew if I relapsed, I would die
Mm.
because if he died,
Right.
it was coming for me. Okay. And I also knew that I hated the language of the steps and that to believe in God felt like a type of death too.
Mm.
The death of everything I had learned that kept me safe. So, what did that look like? Me trying to control and manage everyone and everything into utter exhaustion and failure. In particular, my marriage, which started to fall apart because that guy that found those pills
Right.
became my fiance. When I kicked and screamed in early recovery, "Why haven't you put a ring on my finger?" "Oh, I
Mm.
don't know. Maybe because it's been insane between us
Right.
and we should take a second." Nope. Stomped, kicked, screamed. We just trudged forward like young, reckless kids in love. He became my fiance, and then not too long after that, he became my husband.
Mm.
And he was the only good thing I had, so I thought. And then he pulled away, and he pulled away, and he pulled away. And the more he pulled away, the tighter I gripped. And I did and said anything that I could to make him love me. And it didn't work.
Mm.
We were fighting every single day. And mind you, I'm in the beginning of my career. I'm sober. I'm hanging on by a thread. I'm physically abstinent, but I'm not happy. And my husband's pulling away, pulling away, pulling away. The fighting is getting more and more intense, never physical,
Mhm.
but it's emotionally intolerable. I'm flying into fits of rage. Rage was never even a part of my story. And we had one really bad fight where he got right up here.
Mm.
And I knew I had to get out of the house. That turned into sleeping on my friend's couch, then sleeping with a sponsor who tried to press the idea of God down my throat until I kicked and screamed and said, I can't do this with you, which turned into sleeping on another friend's air mattress until finally a friend said, you can't live like this. You need to get a place of
Mhm.
your own, which was terrifying. I had literally never been on my own. I went away to college. Then I moved back to New York. Really soon after I moved to Manhattan and started that bartending thing, he moved in with me.
Mm.
He had been my buddy, my roommate, my best friend, my everything. And this sober girlfriend suggesting, as a married woman with a doctorate in physical therapy, with a couple years sober, that I go and sign a lease and live on my own and start healing. And I did, because I did not know what else to do. I wasn't ready to leave that marriage,
Right.
but I had no idea what to do. And I wasn't ready to die. So I didn't want to relapse, but I didn't know how to live. So I signed a lease. And I
Well,
remember that that lease was 6 months long. The apartment wasn't furnished. I got a mattress. First couple weeks, just a mattress on the floor. I laid on the mattress, looked up at the ceiling, started hysterically crying. What am I going to do now? Because my whole life, even my ability to fall asleep,
mhm.
came from something outside of me. My mom used to stroke my hair as a little girl, made me really tired, and I'd fall asleep. Then I met him. Then I met drugs and alcohol. And everybody was helping me fall asleep.
Mm.
He took over my mom's task of stroking my head. And now I'm in this apartment in some kind of weird separation, and I'm alone.
So let me ask you a question. With that, because you're now in recovery, you're clean for 2 years. Your mom used to stroke your hair, and now your husband is stroking your hair. Do you think that in some way, shape, or form that was another form of addiction, even though it was just
Hmm.
hair stroking?
I what I would say that was another iteration of dependency on
Okay.
something outside of myself to make me feel okay. Yes. And it wasn't destructive
Mhm.
the way classic traditional addiction can be, but wasn't it? Because I was 30
Mm.
and I had no idea how to self soothe, not a clue. And in that moment, I heard a little whisper that said, you're going to have to put your arms around yourself. That was my intuition. I hadn't heard her in over 20 years.
Hmm.
And so I did. I hugged myself and I cried myself to sleep. And then the right person came into my life at the right time, who was in multiple 12-step programs, who had done a lot of therapy work. And she said, I think we need to do the steps on your marriage. It's not like you're running off and wanting to drink and get an 8 ball. But boy, are you really trying to use this marriage to make you feel safe and whole in the world? And it's not working.
Can we unpack that? Because
Yes.
that's very interesting. Because when I was listening to an interview and you had talked about that, it was kind of like a light bulb. Because when people think of addiction, they
Mm,
normally think of something that they're ingesting or that they're drinking, but they're not thinking of, I may be addicted to my partner because I feel safe and I don't
mhm.
want to feel any other way. So even though what I'm in right now is not working, it's familiar. Kind of like when you take that drug, that it's you're not even getting high anymore. You're just getting leveled. So can you unpack that? Because I found that very interesting that she made that connection.
Hmm. I think this is at the heart of the mission that I'm on in the
Mm,
book that I've written, which is that not only from my own personal experience, but again and again and again with my clients, with family members and friends, everywhere someone is suffering from some cycle of emotional addiction. We can call it emotional dysfunction, addicted to people pleasing, addicted to self righteous anger. I didn't do it, you did. Addicted to thinness, addicted to productivity. And we become dependent on that because usually it served us really well in our formative years, right? So I learned as a young child that when you get the A and when you have the boyfriend and when you land the job and you get the degree, you're good. You're good. That's a surefire way to a happy, stable life. So keep going. Go out there and get it. Even if your insides are empty and despondent. So I was completely stuck in an addictive cycle of trying to control people, places, things, and situations. Because guess what? When I did that as a girl, it helped keep my household safe. I was the one that took the emotional temperature of everybody in the room. And I said and did what was necessary to make everything okay so I could feel safe.
mm,
I became an expert at it. My nervous system thrives in that space. So, of course, I was living out that pattern in my adult sober life. I hadn't replaced that pattern with anything else because the option to replace it with God and what seemed like a very patriarchal approach to recovery was off the table for me. The only thing I could rely on were the decades of circuitry that had been cemented from childhood into adulthood. So, yes, I think unless you are the 0.0001% of a human who came from a really stable home, who came out into adulthood with the kind of resilience that lets you fall and fail and get back up and love yourself through it, you're probably stuck in a cycle of emotional addiction too. And maybe it's not killing you. Maybe your life is not in danger, but I bet your spirit is. Maybe you're in a job that you know you don't want to be in, but you're in it because you think you have to, because your parents told you, or because now you're stuck financially and you don't see a way forward. Your soul is keeping score. I have seen people I love get to the end of their life, mother and father included, who have been stuck in emotional cycles of addiction and dysfunction, such that they have lost connection to their truest self, to their friends, to their family, and most importantly, to themselves.
Mhm.
And I will not live that way. But boy, did I try, because it's what I knew. And what's really wild about the science of change, because in this crisis point, when this woman made this suggestion to work the steps
Mhm.
in this new way, I had no template for how to be happy and joyful in recovery. I only knew that I couldn't drink and use and that I couldn't live the way I was living anymore. And so the canvas was painted. I had enough pain. I had the willingness. And she found me right in that moment, face down in a pit of despair. And she said, let's try this. What if we said, you're powerless over your marriage? You're powerless over how resentful your husband is at what happened on the front end of your addiction, because I cheated a lot. You're powerless over whether he'll forgive you, over whether he is cheating on you now. You're powerless over the future that you thought you were going to have with him, over the fact that you don't even know who you are without him. And when you try to exert power over this man, your life becomes unmanageable in the following ways. And on we went. Step 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we get to the 9th step, which is making an amends. First person who ever in my whole life asked me this question. Have you ever made an amends to yourself? I am a diehard perfectionist. I am a professional self-lacerator.
Mhm.
No, that has not even occurred to me that I could say, hey, Sam, you might have made some really bad choices, but you are not a bad person. That is when my life began to change. That is when I had a way to clear the shame of everything I had done, both to myself and especially to him, so I could see things clearly. Not just that marriage and
Mhm.
how little it was actually serving me, but see clearly what it is I wanted and deserved. I have, since that time, worked those steps again and again and again around the life situation that I am in. Turns out he was having an affair. We reconciled. The details are in my book. It's too long to go into. We have a big, beautiful life. We have 2 amazing kids. But the journey back to forgiving him,
Mhm.
boy, was that hard. You better believe there would have been no shot if I never made an amends to myself.
Mhm.
There would have been no shot if I didn't use the steps around every single trigger that came up when I was trying to forgive him. I have navigated the pregnancy journey, the miscarriage journey, the I'm afraid I'm going to have a stillborn because I have a scary high risk condition,
Mhm.
and surviving that, postpartum depression, losing my dad, my mother's mental illness, which is actively in real time an issue. She is now living out of a Motel 6 because she got kicked out of the living facility She was
Mm,
in. She refuses to take her medication.
mm,
Those steps are not about religion. Those steps are not about men versus women. When we reimagine the language, because in my opinion, we have to, we know more now.
mhm,
We know more about addiction and childhood trauma and psychology than we have ever known before. And if we don't update the language to be more compassionate and widen the lens on who they can help, then what are we doing? I couldn't get well until those steps were reinvented. And I continue to make them apply to any hard thing that comes my way. And because I finally found a template of behaviors that I could practice at any time
mhm.
that are inside of me that I can pull from, not outside of me, inside of me, I've been able to rewire my brain. There is no reason that I should be here. I should have been dead. If Bobby didn't die, I probably would have relapsed and died too.
Mm,
But I'm here. And 2 years ago, I got the phone call I had been dreading my whole life that my big sister died of a drug overdose.
mm,
I tried everything to save her life. I did it the old way, controlling, manipulating, managing, promoting the 12-step program. And I tried it the easier, softer way. I tried to lead by example. I tried to let her know I am in your corner, whether you are using or not, and that I am here when you are ready to face everything that you are running from. And it didn't work. It didn't work. She died before she got the opportunity to change. And part of me died too on that
mm.
day. And all I knew in that moment was that I had to write a book, wasn't sure about what. And I also knew that I was not just Samantha, the physical therapist, that anywhere I went from that moment on, I needed to bring all of me into places and spaces. The sober woman, the podcast host, the singer, the dancer. Not that I had to be up on every stage doing all those things, but
Right.
I wasn't just a clinician, and that work didn't resonate anymore. And I had no idea what my future was going to look like. And holy shit, the last 2 years of my life are almost unrecognizable. And at the same time, they are exactly everything I ever wanted when I was young.
So let me ask you about that because you have come through some experiences that, as you said, would have killed a lot of other people. Where, in the midst of all of that, where did the desire
Mhm.
to keep putting one foot in front of the other come from? Because you have to have a desire to want to, even as bad as it is, to want to live. So where
Mm.
did that resiliency and the desire to want to keep going come from?
It's such a good question. Um, on the one hand, if I think back to how I've always been from when I was little, and I compare that to my sister, I had a fire. inside of me. Always. I was a little fearless in a good way. Why won't you tell that boy you like him? I don't understand what you're so afraid of. You don't have him anyway. I would just go and do it. I'd
Mhm.
go and say it. You know, I had an inner pull to live loudly, big, do something important. I don't know if my sister ever felt like she could, but I honestly think that Bobby dying was a real wake up call because I knew for sure that was my fate. And so to be directly confronted with the idea that I could absolutely die
Mhm.
made me ask myself, do I want to?
Mm.
And the answer was no. I don't know why it was no. It was no. And the rest of that was, but I have no idea how to live.
Mm.
And until I did that really deep healing work and I started to hear more and more and more the whisper of my intuition that I now call God, I was hanging on by a fucking thread. As soon as I got to know my truest self and I let myself be guided by it, and I got some small wins. You know, they say you build self-esteem by doing esteemable acts. I'd listen to her voice nudge me in a direction,
Mm.
career direction, personal direction. And I go, I'm going to follow through on that. And then something magical would happen. And I go, oh my God, maybe this life thing can look and feel different if I'm run by her and not the critic. So I was scraping by, knowing I didn't want to die, but not knowing how to live. And only after I began to listen to and honor the wishes of my intuition did I start to accumulate some sober experience where I could go, life might actually be this brutal, gorgeous place that I want to stay in a little longer.
Mm.
It's a really good question.
Yeah. So I want to talk about your book, Breaking the Circuit, your
Mm,
personal journey. And your overview says it's for anyone who has tried and failed. So my
mm.
question to you is, who should read this book?
I'm going to give you a micro answer and then a macro.
Okay.
Okay. The micro answer is that who I think this book will directly and immediately speak to are the people who are struggling with substance abuse and who hate the steps. Okay. If we get really granular, maybe it's women, maybe it's moms who are sober or trying to get sober, or who are miserable in sobriety, who cannot work those steps as they are outlined. My book speaks directly to them. And if you are a human on planet Earth, because by the way, besides addiction, grief does not discriminate. And every single one of us will be confronted with it. We will lose, if we haven't already, someone we love. And in my opinion, that is the hardest thing. And when that happens, we will have many different choices about how we handle it. We can relapse, quote unquote, into an old behavior or an addiction. We can numb out and be half dead, where we don't go so far in the pain and so far into the joy, but we just hover at a 5 out of 10.
Mm.
Or we can do what I decided to do this time around and be fully alive. But every one of us is going to go through it. So this book is for everyone.
Okay. So I want to read you a comment that one of my returning listeners stated. Can never unsee, can never unhear media said, knowing what Samantha knows now about healing and doing the work, how important are self check ins, even when you are having good days after experience the trauma she has experienced. And I want to point out
Mm,
something that they said, the importance of self check-ins, because I don't think a lot of people do that, because that kind of goes to what you talked about earlier with
mm.
the self hugging, the self love. People don't love on themselves enough. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So this is a great moment to take a practical approach to one of the steps. So step 10 traditionally says, continue to take personal inventory. And when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Okay. What does that mean? That means that on a daily basis, we are usually towards the end of the day, but it can be throughout. We're going through the day, we're reviewing it. Who did I speak to? How did I speak to them and
Mm,
myself? What did I do well? What could I do better? Is there an amends that I have to make? Is there a congratulations that is in order? Right? I do step 10 every single day. Sometimes it's a really quick mental checklist. A lot of the time, it's an email with a sober friend. We've been doing it for 10 years. A couple things we're powerless over, a couple things we're grateful for, a couple things we did well that day, and a couple things we'd like to do better. Checking in, regardless of whether things are good or bad, is crucial. If we want to get science-y, it's crucial because those original pathways that were formed in our early years are very, very strong. They're there. And we need to continue on a healing journey to practice the new patterns, the new behaviors. That is a new behavior. I'm 41. I'm 15 years sober. I only really started recovering 10 years ago. I have 10 years of practice
mm,
checking in with myself, loving on myself. I have 31 years of beating myself up. If I don't regularly, in good times and bad, check in with myself, I might just slip back to a strong neural pathway that's living in those brain centers somewhere, ready to get lit up. Does that answer that question?
that answers the question, because they said step 10, yes, love your answer. Each one, teach one. That is amazing. This is something that I
Mm,
hope that people really go back and listen to a few times. But I want to switch gears a little bit, because
mm,
you have an extensive dance resume, and I'm researching and come to find out you've worked with some pretty big people. I'm looking, 50 Cent. I see Beyonce's Run the World. and all this other stuff. And I'm like, okay, Samantha, I see you. So now, is there any time for downtime? And on top of that, I
Hmm.
watched this video on YouTube last night that was pretty racy.
Mm.
Bang bang. Let's talk about bang bang. Where did the you're a phenomenal choreographer. You're a singer because I'm looking at the video. I'm like, okay, okay. I need a cigarette and I don't smoke. But where did the where did the idea for that song come from?
Oof. Dance was my very first love. You know, I was put in dance school, so was my sister,
Mhm.
and she was older than me. My mom said when she saw me at my first recital and she saw me hit the, exactly on the 8 count, she was like,
Okay.
"I have a dancer." So, I definitely have an innate talent for it, and then, of course, I did a ton of training in my youth, but also, as I said, I was being sort of skedaddled to the side, this is not a career path.
Mhm.
But I really believe that if you let it, what you love will find you again and again. And even when I had my physical therapy clinic and I had kind of stopped auditioning, those small wins, I called them small, that I had in the short time I was really trying to pursue the industry were really sidelined by my cocaine addiction. And then I got my fancy degree and I was Dr. Hart, and my dancing days were pretty much done. But they weren't because people would see me in a dance class or they'd see me post a video and they were like, "Can I be your student? Do you have a class somewhere? Can we?" Or someone would say, "There's this showcase coming up." That's what that Bang Bang routine was from. It was from an artist showcase. I was full blown doing physical therapy, but
Mm.
someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Do you want to put a piece in this?" I used to dream about being a famous choreographer. That was like the dream, second to having a record deal and being able to go on tour everywhere and have all of it, the stage, the singing, the dancing, the lights. So when I got this opportunity to put a piece in a showcase, I was like, "Okay, let's do it. Maybe these days aren't done,
Mhm.
And I had so much inside of me to express because I had really only scratched the surface of any of it. What's really amazing about that particular song is I look back and I mean, I love that choreography. That choreography was kind of quirky and out of the box and sexy, but edgy and strange. And I just remember hearing that song and going, that is so bizarre. And I want to see what comes out of me
Mm.
when I do it. Because if I'm going to get this shot to put my work on a stage, I'm not going to do some bubblegum pop routine.
Right.
I want it to punch. And that shit just came out of me. And last year, 40 years old with 2 babies at home. I now live in a suburb of LA, okay? I joined an Equinox fancy near my house. Really didn't want to, but it was the only place that had childcare during the pandemic, and I was desperate. I go and take a dance class at the Equinox. I take it a second time. I'm crushing it, right? I'm like this girl from New York City who's like in a suburb, just in an Equinox class, just and the teacher's like, okay. She makes an announcement and says, "So I am going to be moving to a different location for 3 months. We need to find a teacher for this class." Now, mind you, my first teaching job ever with dance was in a gym, in Gold's Gym in New York City, the same
Mm.
place that I was Bobby's personal trainer. All these years later, 20 years later, she goes, "We got to find somebody." And I go, my
Oh,
hand just
wow.
went up. I hadn't taught dance in a gym in 2 decades. I had taught in
Mm.
fancy studios, both in New York and in Hollywood when I first moved to California. Then I was just doing some privates in my clinic in Santa Monica. But a gym, my ego was like, "Oh, I'll never. That's like a demotion. I'll never,
Yeah.
hand went straight up, like someone pulled it up. They speak to me after and they say, we've noticed you and we want to fast track you to being an employee so you can teach. Okay. So now I start teaching this dance class at Equinox. Love it. I love teaching dance, probably more than anything else in the whole world. Second to making a real human connection with another person.
Mhm.
Months into me teaching there, I'm in the middle of a class and this adorable bleach blonde haired boy is poking around, kind of staring in to the class. And I'm like, this guy better not walk in. Sure enough, I'm talking 30 minutes into an hour-long class. Opens the door, joins. And I'm thinking to
Mm.
myself, okay, you are either a fool who's about to feel like a fool, not because I'm going to say anything, but because it
Right.
will show itself, right? Or you are a trained dancer with a set of balls coming into my class halfway through, but you're going to pick it all up and you're going to crush it. That's what he did.
Mm.
And I went over to him and said, who are you? What are you doing here in the suburbs? Why have I never met you?
Right.
Turns out he's a recording artist. He had an extensive childhood career, was now a solo artist, was going on tour to Japan for 2 weeks, a couple months in the future. Ding. Well, I'll be damned if I don't try to go on tour with this man. So I build a relationship. I go have coffee with him. I get to know him. I say, do you have a choreographer? Nope. How about I make a little something up to one of your songs
Mm.
and just show it to you? If you like it, amazing. We can go from there. Fearless. Like when I was little. Nothing to lose. I don't have the opportunity anyway. Make something up, show it to him. He loves it. Says, I want you to be my choreographer. I can't take you to Japan. It's budget's really, really tight. But when I get back to LA, we can go and do a bunch of stuff. But man, I really want to go to Japan. I've never been to Japan. That would be insane. That would be bucket list insane,
Mm.
right? Young Samantha who wanted to go on tour as someone's choreographer. Like, how will I make this work? And I said, what if I paid for my ticket, but you paid me for the choreography and for all the
Mhm.
shows that I was in? Would that work? And he said, yeah. And I said, then I'd like to come. And I did. So last year, I went on tour in Japan as a 40-year-old woman with 2 kids at home.
Mm.
You could never have told me that that was possible, and I would have believed you. And then he heard me sing, humming and hawing in the background. And he said, can you sing? I'm like, kinda. I mean, I've got some raw talent. I am not a superstar singer,
Mhm.
but yeah, I got some chops. Well, do you want to make some music together? He lives 5 minutes from me.
Oh, wow.
So we started making music together. And then when he had a gig, he asked me if I wanted to come and sing one of my songs. So all through the last year, I've been singing and dancing like a fool all
Wow.
over Los Angeles. And then through all the networking and the connection building, I met some people who are successful working music industry professionals. One in particular who at first was very standoffish and kind of like, unless you're 18 with a ton of money, like this is not it, this is not. To which I said, oh, I'm not trying to get a record deal. I'm just experiencing joy
Mhm.
and reckoning with my younger self. There's no delusion here, of what I'm trying to do. And then he started to pay attention to what I'm doing and who I am and what I have to say and this mission that I'm on to 12-step the entire world, right? And that I've
Right.
written a book and I have a screenplay and I have all these. And he said, well, that's really interesting. And have you ever thought about making music that corresponds to your story,
Mm.
to the chapters in your book? because all of a sudden now there's serious depth and weight everywhere you turn, and you're really building a brand. And that's the kind of thing that can get you a production deal with
Mm,
Universal Records. And I said, well, surely I have not ever thought of that, but now I will.
right.
And if we cut and paste from that moment, which was just earlier this year, okay, that was like January, to this moment right now with you, Floyd. This Saturday, today's Thursday, this Saturday, June 8th, knowing that my book comes out June 10th, I thought to myself, well, are you going to wait for somebody to give you permission to do all these things that you love? Or are you going to go and do them? To which I responded, sweet intuition, oh, I'm going to go do them.
Right.
I'm going to go get what's mine. And so I created the kind of event I dream of. I am this Saturday speaking on a stage in Malibu on a beautiful rooftop in front of 50 people about my story, much like I did today on this interview. I'll have a Q&A. I'll take a little break. I'll change my clothes and I'll come back on the stage and perform original music that I wrote, will sing, have choreographed, and will be dancing to. And I
Wow.
will close out the performance with a brand new song that is not out yet that I wrote with this new guy who had that great idea called Breaking the Circuit.
Oh, wow.
And then I will hang out and I will hear, hopefully, God willing, how something I said helped somebody else.
Mm.
And I have never been more excited or more proud of anything that I've ever done in my whole life.
I am excited. I am excited for you because the gentleman that I listen to by the name of Ed Milet, he always talks about he has this saying that I use all the time. Things don't happen to you, they happen for you.
Mm,
And even when things are at their lowest and at their darkest, it's not happening to you, it's happening for you because, we've been talking for a little bit over an hour. Um, as I said, I did a lot of research and I'm sitting here looking at where you are now on your journey and everything that has happened for you, the good and the bad, has led to
mm,
June 8th because everything that has transpired has made you the person that you are now that will be
mm,
standing on a stage talking, singing, helping, dancing, and just bringing so much light to people's lives. So, with that, I want to ask you this: you've overcome a lot.
mm,
For anyone listening, what would be, if you can list them, 5 things that you would tell someone to set them on the path to recovery, better
mm,
health, and as we just talked about, the courage, even in the face of fear, to take massive action.
mm. Shame thrives in secret. So if you are struggling with anything, whether or not you call it shame, or whether or not you even know if you're ashamed of something, if you're struggling, you need to find just one person that you trust to share it with. You must let it live outside of your body. So you diffuse its power. And with the right person, you realize there's nothing to be ashamed of. That is number one. When you become that honest and you're willing to go to someone and say, this is what I'm thinking and feeling. I can't live like this anymore. One of the next most important things, in my opinion, again, it's my story, is to forgive yourself. And that, by the way, is not a one-time deal. Like grief, forgiveness is not linear. You will have to practice being kinder to yourself. You will have to bear witness to your inner critic and not feed the narrative. You will have to buy yourself a little bit of time when you're emotionally dysregulated to go, wait a second. I'm about to do that thing again. I'm about to call myself that name again. Is there a kinder version of that sentence? So you must get on a path of self-forgiveness. And if you have no idea how, you need to go to people who are doing what you want to be doing and who are living the way you want to be living, that you admire. And you ask them how they're doing it. Tell somebody, forgive yourself. Practice something new that calms your nervous system. If you don't know what that is, you need to take a little time to rediscover it. If you really don't know what that is, think back to when you were a kid. Think back to something you did when you were a kid that made you happy. It might just be that you laughed a lot with one friend. Maybe you need connection again in your life. And you just need to laugh a little. So maybe what you need to do, maybe that practice and that act is just to call somebody you love and you miss who makes you laugh. But you got to do it. You got to do it. You got to practice the new thing. Maybe the practice is just thinking about 3 things that make you feel really good, that are not self-sabotaging. Meditation, going for a walk, sitting in your yard, calling that friend that makes you laugh. Write it down. So when you're completely distressed and struggling and you can't remember because your brain is scrambled, you look at the list and you go, oh yeah, that's right. I'm going to pick that one right now. I'm going to do that thing. Movement for me is medicine. It is not for everyone. But you want to talk about getting a natural high. Just move your body. And I have a really fun recommendation, even if you're a terrible dancer. Because guess what? When you were a kid and music came on, you moved your body. You did. Okay. And it's just the stuff you learned and the fear and the insecurity that made you stop moving. All right. So when nobody's around, turn on a song that you love. And just for those 3 minutes, move around like a fool. I guarantee you will feel better at the end of those 3 minutes. Not just emotionally, physiologically, you will feel better. And the final thing I will say is think about the word hope. Help one person every day. If you do one tiny thing to help someone else, and I'm talking about something that's free, that takes less than 30 seconds, like sending a text message to somebody in your life and saying, I am so proud of you. Watch how that changes your mood. Those are my 5 things.
Wow. Wow. This may be the most important podcast that I've ever done. Honestly. Yeah. And I just have one last question because this has been
Mm,
absolutely amazing.
mm,
I was listening to Viola Davis the other day, and she said that there's this thing that she tells her daughter. And when I heard it, I said, "Oh, I'm going to ask her this because of
mm,
everything that you've experienced in your life." She said that she tells her daughter, "You must be the first love of your life."
mm,
And my question to you is, at this stage of your life, are
mm.
you the first love of your life?
Absolutely. I could not agree with that more. When I think back to this whole wild ride I've been on and everything I've really been trying to do in my recovery, the answer to what I've been trying to find is myself, my capital S self, my truest, most authentic self. I learned as early as 4 to self abandon. And I have been on a journey back home to myself for 15 years. I don't want happy kids necessarily. I don't want a happy life. I want kids and I want a life where the first place I go is inward. And I say, is this what you want? Will this bring you joy? Is this truthful? Because if it's not, if it doesn't, we're out. Let's go somewhere else. Me and you, kid. It's me and you, kid. I want a child that trusts themselves because I trust myself now. I love myself now. And the relationship I have with my intuition is the most important, truest, most beautiful relationship I have ever had and will ever have. And without that, I am not a good woman, friend, daughter, wife, or mother. So, yes, loving on myself is everything. And I make time to do that every single day in my very busy life because it is non negotiable.
Wow. All I can say, ladies and gentlemen, is wow.
Mm,
Wow. So, Samantha, Dr.
mm,
Hart,
mm,
where can people find you on social media? And more
mm,
importantly, where can they buy the book? And
mm.
besides your amazing event coming up this Saturday, what is next and in store for you?
Whew, across all of social media, I am Dr. Samantha Harte, Dr. Samantha Harte, Harte. So whether it's Instagram, which is where I'm really very active, or YouTube, or TikTok, or LinkedIn. That is definitely where you can find me. And also, my website is drsamanthahart.com. And if you check my website out, there are certainly packages where you can buy my book, a signed copy, or you can buy the book and get a bunch of really cool digital assets. You know, I'm also a physical therapist, so I've created a ton of programs over the years to help people not just recover from injury, but actually prevent it, which is where I'm really passionate. So you can certainly explore on my website that part of what I have to offer, but you could also go on Amazon and just type in Breaking the Circuit by Samantha Harte and you'll see it pop up. And It comes out officially June 10th. So you would get it delivered probably a couple days after that. I have the June 8th and a June 30th speaking event in the Los Angeles area coming up. I have one on June 23rd in Las Vegas. So if anybody is in any of those places, you can message me on social media. You can also email me at samantha@drsamanthahart.com and I can give you information. And I have other really fun stuff. I have my own podcast that you can go listen to called The Truth About Addiction. I have some merch. I am wearing the sweatshirt now. It says sober AF. Love me a good sweatshirt.
Me too.
Um, and there'll be more music coming out that people can find on all the streaming platforms. So there's all kinds of ways to get in touch with me. I'm really accessible. And something that I haven't been doing because I've been creating so much over the last 2 years is one-on-one coaching. And I miss it a lot. Obviously, I'm very busy right now, but I am opening up my schedule to some one-on-one coaching. And that could be sort of across the board. It could be life coaching, sober life coaching. It could be, how do you write a book when you've never written one, right? Because now I figured that out too, which was its own crazy process. It could
Yes.
be nutrition counseling. It could be physical therapy or injury prevention. There's so many ways that you could work with me. So just reach out to me, email me, message me on social media. I'm very respondent. So I'm here. I want to be of service.
Wow. So Samantha, this has been an absolutely, I'm going to have to email Michaela and be like, yo, good looking out. Um,
Mm,
because this has been an absolutely amazing interview. Thank you so
mm,
much for taking time out of your day to grace my show with your amazing story, because I really
mm,
think a lot of people need to hear it. And ladies and gentlemen, please go pick up that book. I'm definitely going to get my copy
mm,
because I'm big on personal development, and we could all use improvement. Even if you think you got it going on, even if you think you got it going
mm,
on,
mm,
there is always room for improvement. As Ed Milet says, when he leaves here, when I leave here, I want to meet the best version of myself. I don't want to leave nothing
mm,
on the table.
mm,
So if this book can in any way, shape, or form help you, please go pick up the book. Make sure you
mm,
follow Dr. Samantha Harte on IG and all of her other social media platforms, because I definitely will, because I like to follow people who pour into me and feed me and can also be silent mentors. That-
absolutely.
that's
Mm,
how I do. I was on your Instagram page the other day and I saw you talking
mm,
about Jennifer Gottlieb. I have her book. I have to dive into that. So, but yeah,
mhm,
this has been absolutely amazing, and you definitely have to come back on the show, because I would love to follow your journey, because
mm,
it's been quite a journey. So before we leave, any parting words?
mm. I have two things I can say. One, to something you said a moment ago, which is that fortunately and unfortunately, maybe when we're in the pits, we never graduate from our spiritual curriculum here on earth. So, to your point, yes, if your mind is open, there is always more to learn, period. And there always will be. And thank God for that, because it'd be so boring. The last thing I really want to say is, if no one to the listener has told you in a while or ever or today, you're doing a great job. And I'm so proud of you. That's it.
We're going to leave it there. I'm not even going to close the show the way I normally close it. We are going to leave it there. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining myself and the amazing Dr. Samantha Harte on a conversation with. Have an absolutely wonderful and phenomenal evening. Good night.